Critical, urgent and much needed. That's how the UN Special Envoy to Yemen is describing the country's latest ceasefire. It began at midnight local time and comes into effect a week before UN-planned peace talks in Kuwait. This latest attempt appears to be the best chance to end the fighting between Yemeni government forces backed by a Saudi-led coalition and Houthi-led rebels. But there have already been some reports of fighting since the official start of the ceasefire. In the hours before it began, people in Sana'a had this to say.
We hope that this truce will be a serious truce and it will be reliable. I mean from all parties, and that peace will prevail in the country.
We love the truce and peace, and we never want chaos, because we have been exhausted for a whole year and we want a truce and peace.
It's known that all Yemenis of all generations are for peace and for an end to war. But we are also men of war, and we want this to be a real equitable peace initiative, and that it not be an initiative for surrender.
Well, the Houthi-led rebels seized control of the capital Sana'a in 2014. By spring last year, they had captured Yemen's second city of Aden and dominated the west of the country, where most of Yemen's population lives. In response, the Saudi-led coalition launched airstrikes against the Houthis and sent in ground forces. It pushed the rebels out of Aden and reversed their gains in much of the south. Well, coalition troops have also forced the Houthis to retreat in northern Al Jawf and set their sights on the desert province of Marib. But despite intense shelling and fighting in Yemen's third largest city, Taiz, Houthis continue to battle for control. Well, the conflict has also created a humanitarian crisis in one of the Arab world's poorest countries. 6,200 people have been killed so far. About 2.8 million people have been internally displaced, more than 5 times the number from just 1 year ago. And in March, the UN World Food Programme said nearly half of Yemen's 22 provinces are on the verge of famine, while 14.4 million people across the country don't have reliable access to food. Well, for more on all this, I'm joined now in the studio by TRT World's Abubakr al-Samahi. Abubakr, good to see you. So it's the early stages of the ceasefire. What are we hearing? Is it holding at the moment?
Well, much like previous attempts to broker a ceasefire in the year-long war, there's already reports of violations. So in Marib, in Al Jawf, and most importantly in the third city, Taiz, anti-Houthi forces have reported violations by the Houthis. And then in turn, the Houthis have also reported violations by the Saudi-led coalition. So they've reported airstrikes in Taiz and in Sana'a province. It's obviously very hard to verify what's actually happening on the ground. But we have spoken to some civilians in Taiz who have reported that the Houthis have been shelling or continue to shell various parts of the city.
So why is the focus then seem to be very much on Taiz? Why is that so significant strategically?
Taiz, like I said, is the third city in the country, and it's basically the main front line at the moment. You've got the militias who are broadly in support of the Yemeni government, in control of the actual city itself. But the surrounding areas, most of the province is still controlled by the Houthis, and they've laid effective siege to Taiz since August last year. If the government does manage to advance and take Taiz fully and then advance towards the north, it really marks the first advance by the Yemeni government into what was formerly North Yemen. So currently they control most of what was South Yemen. So it kind of marks that they're actually advancing and really moving on the Houthi territory and heartland.
Let's be optimistic for a second. Let's say if it does hold this cessation of hostilities, this ceasefire, what happens next in the political process?
You've got the peace talks in Kuwait coming up next week. The Houthis and the Saudis are kind of saying the right things right now about peace. They've set up a committee to monitor the ceasefire, for example, a joint committee to monitor the ceasefire. The problem is if they do come to agreement, the Houthis and the Saudis primarily, with the Yemeni government on the Saudi side, there are so many other players on the ground in Yemen. There are so many other factors and potential spoilers. So you've got, militias across the country who may see that a peace deal is simply not in their interest. The Houthis are allied to the ex-president. He may see a peace deal, again, as not in his interest. So that's the real problem. You could, yes, have a peace deal between the main players, But what about the others on the ground who may seek to continue the conflict?
Okay, Abubakr, thank you very much.
Thank you.